Hey fish friends, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. Zenzo with Tazawa Tanks. Now in a recent video where I gave an update on some tanks, I had shared that Corey from Aquarium Co-op was going to be here and we were going to do a Fishroom tour. Well, some flights got changed and had to get rescheduled, and so basically that is not going to happen this trip. He will come down some other time. I work at Aquarium Co-op for those of you that don't know, so we'll get him down here sometime. So what I thought, since I was unable to make that happen, is I'm going to go ahead and do a tour of this room, talk about every single one of my fish tanks down here in this room, and about the fish and what's going on in there. Now I do want to make another video, and maybe we'll do this one in a couple of weeks, where I also talk about what makes this fish room run, how everything works, what I like about this room, and also what I don't like. So stay tuned for that one. If you haven't done so already, maybe subscribe, hit that notification bell. That way, when that video comes out, you'll know to come back and give it a watch. So I thought what we would do to kind of start things off is we'll just go kind of around the room. So the room kind of wraps around and we'll kind of go all the way around and look at all these tanks. So anyway, starting off here, this is a 75-gallon aquarium. It's got a bunch of Malawi cichlids in there. These are all Mbuna. And yes, there are a lot of fish in there. How many are in there? I don't know, because even though I tried to remove the females a couple of years ago and get rid of all the fry, we still have some females in there because they keep making new fish. In fact, there's a little baby over there. Let's see if we can zoom in. Hiding in the rocks, that little bluefish right there in the middle, that is obviously a new baby. So anyway, this is a great aquarium. I love it. 75 gallons is one of my favorite aquarium sizes, and we have a lot of Mbuna in here. Basically just some rock work and some saulosi tang, which is this little plant here. I've been trying different plants to see what are some different plants that Mbuna might leave alone and not eat, and so far they've been leaving this alone. The only problem is it's pretty messy. It doesn't attach to anything, so it just kind of floats around. So every time they get all crazy and start swimming quickly, then there's a big cloud of saulosi tang all over the place. But anyway, great tank, love it. Love having Malawi cichlids, one of my favorite. Moving on, here we have the African mudskipper paludarium. Maybe I should talk in this one a little bit about what I like about this tank and what I don't like as well, as this is one of the more difficult ones to keep. Now, as far as mudskippers, they are a goby, they are a fish, and even though they look like they're amphibians, they are in fact fish. And this is a brackish aquarium. Brackish is a mixture of saltwater and freshwater, so kind of like where a river meets the ocean, that is brackish water. So they do require those minerals that are in the saltwater for them to be healthy and thrive. And in here I've got a bunch of Africans. I don't remember exactly how many. I want to say like 6 or 7. I did give some away. I think there's 7 of them in there. And this is also a 75-gallon tank, and it is set up paludarium style. Now, what do I not like about this tank? There's 2 things. One, I'm kind of scared of my fish, which might be kind of ridiculous to say, but I've gotten bitten by these by mistake when I put my hand in the tank and they thought I was feeding them, and I got bit and the teeth are kind of sharp. So a little pinch, but for some reason it kind of spooks me out. The other thing is, because it's a paludarium, all this kind of glass area right here, it gets foggy or it gets like a bunch of mineral buildup. So I spend a lot of time having to clean this off if I'm going to film. I didn't do that right now. I just kind of wanted to show you how things are all the time. So when I come back to get some B-roll, I have to come and clean this glass to basically get a clear shot. But as you can see, the African mudskippers are quite large. People that come here in person, they're very surprised when they see how large they are. So I'll put my hand up to the glass as a reference. And yeah, they're quite big. I would say they're probably like the size of a hot dog. They're pretty big, and people do get surprised. Moving on, we have this 29-gallon tank, which I haven't talked about very often or very much. It's gone through a couple of versions of a tank. But anyway, right now I'm trying to turn this into a jungle. And by jungle, I mean completely just filled in with Vallisneria. So as you can see, we've got a bunch of Vallisneria growing in this aquarium. When I first set it up and put some val in here, it was just a few plants along the back. And they have shot these runners, so we can see that the plant is going from here to here to here to here, and it's going to keep doing that all over the place. And so basically I want this to be a jungle, and I'll probably put some more cardinal tetras in there. We've got, I think, 7 or so cardinal tetras in there right now, and I've got 1 lone discus. I used to have 2, and one of them passed away a few months ago, I think, a couple of months ago. And I just have the solo discus that's kind of shy, but when I did put it in this tank, it tends to come out and about more than when it was in the other aquarium. So we'll talk about that other tank later, but basically I just want to grow this out and kind of make a nice jungle. All right, going down to the bottom row, we've got a couple of 40 breeders here, then we've got a 10-gallon over there. So here we have a pair of 5-star generals. This is a jewel cichlid from West Africa, and beautiful fish. We'll get some good B-roll later. Really beautiful fish, pretty aggressive. So if you are going to keep this fish, I would recommend keeping them by themselves, as they can be extremely territorial. And they also used to spawn for me. I haven't had a successful spawn in a while. I don't know if maybe just, you know, the female's done laying eggs or whatever. It's been a while, but I have had several successful spawns and actually ended up selling a bunch of fish to stores and things like that. But just kind of a fun tank, a couple fun fish to keep. All right, this next tank, not so fun. In fact, we may not see any fish at all, as they are extremely shy. And I have my Topaz cichlids in here, and there are a handful. I think there's 6. I started off with 4, and then I had a spawn, and they got a couple babies that grew up. And yeah, basically this tank I don't like at all, because the fish that are in this tank either don't like being down low, or they have too much hiding spaces, and I just can't enjoy them. So we're gonna move these fish, and we'll talk about that here in a couple of minutes. Moving on over here, this is just kind of a little planet tank that I have with some white cloud mountain minnows, and just some plants and a bunch of floating plants and duckweed and all kinds of nonsense. What I like about these is they always spawn for me, and I'll get little tiny babies that will hide in these floating plants, and then I'll see them and I'll just, you know, feed them some fry food. But nothing really special about this aquarium other than it's just kind of an easy 10-gallon tank that's, yeah, got some cool fish in there. All right, now we're kind of back in this little back alcove section of the fish room here. And we have this 65-gallon aquarium that I talked about in a recent video where it wasn't doing so great. Ended up ripping everything out of there, took all the fish out of there, and I had a bunch of duckweed that I couldn't get out, so I ended up getting a couple of goldfish. I've been thinking about getting goldfish for a long time. I haven't kept goldfish. Well, besides the goldfish on the pond outside and, you know, outdoor goldfish, I haven't had any indoor goldfish probably since a long time. I don't want to, you know, date myself, but it's been decades since I've had any indoor goldfish. So I got a couple of fantails, and they're both doing well. I was thinking, like, maybe I'll name them, like, they're basically going to be my cleanup crew for duckweed. So I'll be able to move them around and put them in different tanks, or, you know, put duckweed in there and let them clean them up. So maybe we'll call them like Hoover and Dyson or something, like vacuums. But anyway, a couple of goldfish in there. 65-gallon aquarium is just basically a 40 breeder, but super tall. As comparison, this is a 55-gallon aquarium right next to it. And you can see that the 65 is much taller than the 55. So in there, I've got some Valsinaria growing as well. I basically changed out some substrate, planted those plants, and I'm kind of wanting a jungle-ish theme as well. And they're not quite as thick as the other discus tank. But what I'm going to do with this tank is, once I get those plants established, I'm going to take out the goldfish and I'm going to put those Topaz cichlids in there. So that way they're higher up off the ground. I'll be able to see them easier, even from afar. Like right now, we're kind of way back here, so I can stand here and still see the fish. And hopefully that will work. And just kind of be, it's a little bit bigger of a tank too. So, you know, obviously 25 more gallons than a 40 breeder. So that's what's going on with this tank. Moving on here, we've got a brackish tank, again, salt and freshwater mix. We've got a bunch of mollies in here. I have this kind of what would you call this, like a shelf made out of expanding foam. And I used to have a bunch of fiddler crabs on there, and then when those died off after a year or so, I put some mudskippers in there for a little bit before I moved those to a different tank. And right now it's just kind of a shelf. So I could just completely make this a full aquarium again and not have any kind of land area. But I'm kind of wanting the fiddler crabs again. So I might get some more and put those in there. I went to the store a couple weeks ago to find some, but they didn't have any in stock. Down below, in case you see that, that's just a quarantine tank that's got nothing in there but some sponge filters and some cycled media. So nothing to see there. Moving on, one of my favorite aquariums is the Indian mudskipper paludarium. So just like the other paludarium that we showed you with the African mudskippers, this is the Indian variant, a lot smaller. So where the other ones are like a hot dog, these are more like a pencil. Like they're thin, smaller than my pinky, and even though they're a little bit boisterous and can, you know, get in spats with one another, they're so small they don't really do much damage. We do have some bumblebee gobies in there. There are a bunch of bumblebee gobies that kind of occupy different parts of the aquarium or paludarium. We have some Amano shrimp. And for those of you that don't know, Amano shrimp can survive in brackish water. So you can see one right there, right on that rock there in the middle, right there. And so Amano shrimp can survive in brackish water. So I'm hoping that it will maybe spawn and, you know, see if I can get some more. But yeah, there's a bunch of Amano shrimp in there, bumblebee gobies, and the Indian mudskippers. Next to the, I should have mentioned this is a 40-gallon tank. So next to the 40-gallon paludarium here, we have a 16-gallon bowfront aquarium. This is actually my oldest aquarium that I own. I think this tank I've had since like 2013, maybe 2012. So I've had this tank for like 10 years, and yeah, it's the oldest tank in this fish room. So anyway, basically just kind of a simple planted tank with some dwarf aquarium lily and a bunch of kind of random guppies. But just, I like having guppies. They're kind of a fun fish to play around with. I'll move them in different tanks. I've got some upstairs. You can even put them in brackish water. So yeah, just kind of a colorful, fun tank. Moving on, right over here, this is a 60-gallon breeder. This is a wide, basically 40 gallons. So it's 48 inches wide. It's 18 inches front to back. I always forget how tall aquariums are because I don't really care about the height so much. But basically this same height as a 40 breeder, but just wider. And the reason why is we have this cool sign back here, and I didn't want to cover this area with like a tall 75-gallon tank or something like that. So in here, I talked about this in a recent video. We've got a couple of Peruvian puffers in there. I moved my stir-by Corridora in there. We've got some Amano shrimp in there that the puffers leave alone. Got some Autocinclus in there. Not as many snails as before because of the puffers, which is a good thing because you guys might have remembered the dental surgery thing. But yeah, overall, just kind of a fun tank. Same thing here, just letting the plants grow. So I'm kind of leaving it alone. Let the plants grow. I fertilize, you know, a couple times a week, and I just want these plants to kind of take off so I can get kind of a jungle thing going on here. Down below, we have, I think this is a 16-gallon cube or 15 gallons, basically 15-gallon cube, rimless tank. And in here, I have some Autocinclus, I have some shrimp, I have snails, and I have 2 Apistogramma. Now, the problem with this tank, I actually just pulled a bunch of plants out of here recently because it was fully like filled in with plants. It was kind of a jungle. The problem is that I don't have a male and a female Apisto, as some of you pointed out a long time ago. I ended up with 2 males, one kind of a subdominant male. So they seem to get along. The smaller one kind of tends to keep out of the way of the bigger one, except for feeding time, and then he kind of runs out and gets what he wants. But ultimately, I probably should move that other male, but they're both healthy and, you know, no nipped fins or anything, so I'm kind of leaving it alone. But just kind of a little planted tank that I have down here. Moving on over here, another brackish tank with top hat blennies. So several years ago, Bob from Steenfod Aquatics sent me a pair of top hat blennies that he had kept for a while. and decided to not keep them. And there's one right there underneath the rock. But I had 2 of them, and one passed away after I had it for maybe like 3 or 4 years or so, or right around there. But anyway, brackish tank, just kind of a fun algae herbivore kind of fish, although it does eat some shrimp now and then, so maybe more of an omnivore. But very reclusive, not a common fish that you find. So if I find them again in the store, I might grab a couple more, but fun tank. Over here, we have a 40-gallon breeder that I talked about in videos about how to make 3D backgrounds. And in here, we have a green spotted puffer. This is brackish water. Again, saltwater and freshwater mixed. Got a mangrove growing out of there, kind of like we do in the Indian mudskipper paludarium. So there is the green spotted puffer. Beautiful fish, voracious appetite. We also have some night gobies in here, but they are extremely reclusive, hiding in these caves down in there that I made, and basically never see them unless I like put some bloodworms in the tank and then hide like 10 feet away and wait for them to come out. But otherwise, kind of a fun tank. I let the water level down recently. Just gotta do some maintenance on some stuff and then I'll bring it back up. But yeah, I do love this puffer for sure. All right, moving on. One of my favorite fish in this fish room are the saulosi. Chindongo saulosi, Pseudotropheus saulosi, whatever you want to say. Beautiful fish with dimorphism where the males are blue, the females are yellow. And they're a dwarf Mbuna, so full-size Mbuna, you know, 3.5, 4 inches versus 7 inches of the other one, and a lot less mass. And really enjoyed this tank. Added a bunch more rock work not too long ago, as you may have remembered. We do have in here Saswassertang as well, trying to play with plants that are Mbuna friendly. We do have a little bit of hornwort left in there and some water lettuce that they tend to not eat. And eventually I'm going to, when I'm not being lazy and procrastinating, I'm going to turn one of the upstairs aquariums in a living room into a saulosi tank as well, just because I love this fish so much. So that's a future project that my wife has been bugging me about, but I'm reluctant just because it's so much work, and I'll talk about that in an upcoming video. Moving over here, we have another African cichlid tank. This is my Peacock tank. In here, some of my oldest fish that I have had or have kept. I want to say that some of these fish might be, what year is it, 2023, maybe 2016, 2017-ish, when some of these fish came to me. So like that big sulfur head thing there, I want to say I've had that fish since 2016 or maybe 2017. I have to go back and look at old videos and photos. But yeah, so it's, you know, been in my care for 6 years plus and still doing well. Pretty long time for, you know, a lot of people with African cichlids. A lot of these I, you know, bred. Some of the larger ones, like that sulfurhead, I didn't breed it. It was one that I had purchased, but others I've bred when I used to breed them. And this is a 90-gallon acrylic tank, so 5 feet wide. It's not your normal 90 like a 75, but it's wider, so it's 5 feet wide, close to 18 inches front to back, or right around there. It's pretty wide. We've got the 3D background that I got from Universal Rock, so I do love that background. And it does add some more depth and dimension and an aesthetic that I like to this tank. Plastic plants because, you know, Malawis are pretty destructive, and then just some pothos on top to help with the filtration. So over here we have my gold ocellatus tank. You can see one there in the middle. These are the gold ocellatus shell-dwelling cichlids from Lake Tanganyika. The problem that I have is ever since I got that big spawn and I gave Dean, master breeder Dean, a bunch of them, I haven't had like successful spawns since then. So I do have, you know, several adults. I do know that I do have males and females in here because they've spawned before. And every once in a while I see fry. But what I suspect is that one of the adults might be predating on the fry once they get to a certain size. So we're not seeing any additional fry growing up. So lots of shells. We've got line of sight breaks. So there's plenty of shells for all of the adult fish and the fry and hiding places. But yeah, that's just kind of what's going on. I don't love the duckweed situation that I have, so I'm starting to address that now. Sometimes tanks look like this one down below where they're just covered in duckweed. But yeah, I've got to do some maintenance on this. The water quality is fine, and obviously the duckweed helps with the water quality and recent water changes and frequent water changes. But I've got to do a little bit of extra care on this tank to get it looking better. But yeah, that's what's going on there. And then down here we've got another 40 breeder. This tank is has a bunch of Turkana jewel cichlids. These are ones that I got from Dean, that he got from Lawrence, Kent, up in Washington, and really good looking cichlids. I haven't really decided on if I want to separate them and just pair them off and try to spawn them, or just kind of leave it the way it is. And the way that it is because there's like 10 of them in there. Typically that's not a good thing because they'll fight, but because there's so many of them, they kind of leave each other alone because it's hard to pick on one fish when there's 9 other fish that are swimming around and getting in the way, and it's hard to target one. So far so good. And I do have some Congo tetras in there as well, and that's about it. A little too much duckweed and one sword plant that's kind of hanging on, but yeah, that's the 40 breeder. Okay, and last but not least, we have the 125 Tanganyikan tank. I've talked about this tank pretty recently. We've got another 3D background that I got from Universal Rocks. We've got shell dwellers in here. We've got redfin calvus in here. We have, what do we have in here? Julidochromis in here. Neorite snails. We've got plants. A couple different plants. We've got Valsneria. That's that tall plant growing there, and I threw in, just for fun, some swords because I wanted to see how they would do. So far they seem to be holding up all right. So we've got some swords there and some swords back there. There is some Anubias barely hanging onto that rock there, a lot of algae, but otherwise really loving this tank. I love shell dwellers, I love Tanganyikan fish, and as I shared, I think I'm going to hold off on adding more fish in here and just kind of leave it the way it is for now. So that was an abbreviated tour. Basically, I wanted to talk about every aquarium in this fish room and just kind of let you know what's going on. So hopefully you enjoyed it. If you have any specific questions on a specific tank, or if you'd like for me to go into more detail about a particular fish in here or a particular setup, I could possibly do that in a future video. So comment down below. And again, if you've made it this far and if you're not subscribed, please do subscribe. It really does help. Again, YouTube is kind of all over the place with algorithms and shorts and long form, but one thing that does help is the like button and the subscribe button. So if you haven't done so already and you made it this far and you like what you've seen, hit those buttons. Anyway, yeah, upcoming, I think we'll do a video talking about the pros and cons, the goods and bads, and the ugly of this fish room, and maybe we'll do another tour upstairs with all those tanks soon as well. So anyway, with that, check out this video right here, and I'll catch you on the next one.